I'm Brenda Prater-Sellers. This is number 0849, the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuff File program, number 0849. And coming up on this edition of the Stuff File program, you'll meet Carla Kaplan, who is the author of Troublemaker, The Fierce, Unruly Life of Jessica Mitford. Who was Jessica Mitford?
Jessica Mitford made the widest leap you can imagine in her life, from the British aristocracy to American communism to muckraking, and she was extraordinarily successful as a writer and a civil rights activist. And so for me, she was really quite a breath of fresh air. She was also a female activist who was hilarious. She was just irrepressibly funny. And for a biographer, that's quite a gift.
Betty Jane Hegerat is the author of a collection of short stories under the title of Elephants in the Room.
I love short stories. Short stories are my favorite because I like writing nice, clean, concise prose that comes to a conclusion, ties up nicely. I've done novels, and novels are like wrestling with a big woolly bear. Not that I don't love them, but the short story is my favorite genre.
Science writer Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back talking about several things dealing with space, including a comet that is visiting our solar system and how tracking this comet can actually hone our skills in planetary defense.
While 3I Atlas doesn't pose any threat to Earth, the techniques that we're honing here, using these cameras on board a distant spacecraft around another planet, allows us to have precise tracking of a fast, distant object, and this could have potential benefits of planetary defense efforts here with our own world.
And there's lots and lots of Stuff File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and of course, an idiot of the day. The guest slater, the person who told you this was show number 0849, was Brenda Prater-Sellers, author of You Slept Where? Calamities of a Clumsy Businesswoman. She was a guest back on show number 0845, so you can go back and listen to what Brenda had to say. Thank you very much, Brenda, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuff File program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. A passenger ferry carrying 267 people crashed into a rocky islet off South Korea's coast on November 19th after the first mate became distracted by his cell phone. The Queen Genuvia II struck the islet at around 8:15 p.m. while traveling at about 26 miles per hour on autopilot, less than an hour from its Makpa destination. All passengers and crew were safely evacuated, though 27 reported dizziness or minor injuries. Said one passenger, "I thought I might die, the sound was so loud." The first mate initially blamed a malfunctioning rudder, but later admitted checking news on his cell phone when he should have been steering away from the islet. Ships typically switch to manual steering in that narrow sea channel section. The first mate, helmsman, and off-duty captain face charges of injury by gross negligence, punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Now, perhaps I don't have enough information for this story, and Lord knows I searched, and I know that the captain traditionally goes down with the ship, but why is the off-duty captain, again, emphasis on off-duty, facing charges? He wasn't even in the wheelhouse at the time of the incident. As for the guy who was at the helm looking at his cell phone, And his initial lame excuse about a malfunctioning rudder? He might as well have just said, "Iceberg, right ahead!" Tallahassee police arrested 38-year-old Joshua Hidalgo on November 17th after he allegedly stole a forklift from a local school and used it to carry away an ATM during an early dawn ride through residential neighborhoods. Officers responded to reports of heavy machinery moving through city streets and found Hidalgo operating the forklift with the stolen ATM attached. When an officer approached asking, "What's up, bro? What y'all got going on?" Hidalgo pointed to the machine saying, "I dropped this thing over here," before fleeing on foot. Police quickly apprehended him after a brief chase. Surveillance footage captured the ATM theft from a business parking lot. Officers recovered clothing and burglary tools believed connected to the incident. Hidalgo faces charges including grand theft, trespassing on school grounds, and possession of burglary tools with intent to use. He must be a graduate of the Wile E. Coyote School of Larceny. And speaking of inept robberies, here's another one. A robbery suspect remains hospitalized after being stabbed with a samurai sword during a November 18th morning home invasion in Norristown, Pennsylvania. Police identified the suspect as 35-year-old Marcus Armstrong, who attempted to rob a man at gunpoint outside a Blackberry Alley home at around 8:45 a.m. When a female victim escaped inside, Armstrong forced entry and encountered her roommate wielding a samurai sword. Said Detective Josh Samuels of Norristown Police, the roommate defended himself. He had the samurai sword and took a swipe at the suspect. It was a pretty chaotic scene this morning. Armstrong fled but was found bleeding heavily on a nearby street. Well, that will teach him to burgle someone with a long blade.
You passed your test. You've got your swords.
And let's get to our first guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Carla Kaplan is the author of Troublemaker, The Fierce, Unruly Life of Jessica Mitford. It's been described as a sympathetic biography of activist, unabashed communist, and muckraker Jessica Mitford. Carla joins us from Boston via Riverside.com. Hi, Carla.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks for being on the program with us. How did you come to write this particular book? What is it about Jessica Mitford that was so captivating to you that you needed to write this book?
So I came to this book after a previous book, which was a group biography of white women of the Black Harlem Renaissance. Women who sort of looked at Bohemia and they looked at Greenwich Village and they looked at Paris and they said, no, I want to somehow be part of a Black movement. And they tried to be allies. They wanted to fit in. And of course, it was very difficult. And in many ways, it was a story of failed allies. And I was really interested after that project in seeing if I couldn't find somebody who made a similarly wide leap from background to chosen community, but was perhaps more successful in doing it. And Jessica Mitford made the widest leap you can imagine in her life, from the British aristocracy to American communism to muckraking, and she was extraordinarily successful as a writer and a civil rights activist. And so for me, she was really quite a breath of fresh air. She was also a female activist who was hilarious. She was just irrepressibly funny. And for a biographer, that's quite a gift.
She came from the UK, so she came from England, she came from a wealthy family, and if I'm not mistaken, she had a whole bunch of sisters, correct?
Exactly. They were all famous as the Mitford girls, and they were famous for being beautiful and incredibly high-spirited and full of energy. She was born in 1917 in the Cotswolds to a family that was very land-rich, but somewhat cash-poor, true of much of the British aristocracy at the time. And she and her sisters were all just amazingly brilliant and creative young women, but they had no outlets. They were not allowed to go to school. They were not allowed to have careers. They were raised to be married, to perpetuate their class, and to be beautiful. And where most of her sisters moved to the far right wing, one married the head of the British Union of Fascists, one was Hitler's intimate. Jessica Mitford moved to the very far left. She ran away from the family, fought in the Spanish Civil War, became an American communist before she became a muckraking writer. And she came out of the British aristocracy absolutely flummoxed at the unfairness of a social system where so many people had so much, where so many people had so little and just a few people had so very much. And for her, that was never fair. So alone among her family, she looked at her privileges and her wonderful wealth and the comfort of her life, and she decided to leave it behind.
I think you just answered the question I was just about to ask, and that is, how did her family, and that's a two-part question, how did her parents feel about her change, and how did her sisters feel about her change?
So it's a wonderful two-part question because it's not quite identical. But the truth is that her incredible bravery in leaving behind one life, and it's a life that many people covet and admire and want for themselves, and she set it aside and built a completely new life as an activist, which she found deeply fulfilling and enjoyable. And her family never was able to recognize how much bravery went into that rebuilding and how bold it was. She ended up alone in the United States. Her first husband was killed in the war. She was, in fact, disowned by her father, so she never inherited any Mitford money. Her mother was a supporter of Hitler. And so the family was, not at all supportive of the choices she made. And when she ran away at 19, she never spoke to her father again. It was a lifelong pain for her. She was actually very devoted to her family of origin, but not to their politics. She tried very hard to reconnect to all of her sisters. She succeeded best with her youngest sister, Debo, as she was known, otherwise known as Deborah, Duchess of Devonshire. Her youngest sister did become a duchess and was the chatelaine of Chatsworth Estate. And she was the one with whom Jessica Mitford was most able to connect. They visited and they corresponded. But the truth is that behind her back, all of the sisters mocked her life. They diminished her choices. They made fun of her. They said very nasty things behind her back. And when she found out about that, she was quite heartbroken because she believed, and this is one of the ways she so speaks to the moment that so many of us live in. Many of us live with divided families. Many of us live with families where in our families there's somebody who seems to take the opposite political position. They may even take a position we associate, with the enemy. And we have to sit down at Thanksgiving with them in a couple of weeks. Jessica Mitford always tried to connect to her family except one sister, Diana, who married the head of the British Fascist Party and was a lifelong fascist. But she did so without ever couching her own politics. She never apologized for her life as a rebel. She never downplayed her left-wing views. But she believed that it would be possible for her and her sisters to connect across that divide. And interestingly, she kept that faith all her life, but her sisters did not.
You mentioned that her first husband died in the war. And also, wasn't she pregnant at the time?
So her first husband was also a cousin. He was Esmond Romilly. He was Winston Churchill's nephew. She ran away with him. They fell in love on day one. They married soon thereafter and went to Spain. And he was shot down and killed early in the war over the North Sea. He had volunteered with the Royal Canadian Air Force as a navigator. It was a very bad career choice. He was the clumsiest, least detailed person you could meet in your life. He could hardly find his way from a room down the hallway. And here he was, a navigator, and unfortunately he was shot down and killed during the war. And Jessica Mitford, a very young woman, was now alone in the United States with an infant daughter. So she was pregnant when he went into service with the Air Force. And by the time he was shot down over the North Sea, she had an infant daughter, no money, very few connections, and no way, even if she had wanted to go back to England, and she didn't, but if she had wanted to go back, it would have been impossible because the war was raging. And she had to find her way and make a life for herself. And of course, as a British aristocrat, she wasn't trained to do that. She had no training, she had no education. She'd never really seen people work. I mean, that's not part of what young aristocratic girls are called to witness. And she got a job with the Office of Price Administration and proved that she was actually a wonderful worker. And that job eventually trained her for investigative work, which trained her for her career as a muckraker. And she did all this on her own.
It's interesting because you mentioned earlier that she was a very humorous and very funny person. And she's had such strife in her early life, and she was ostracized by her family, but it seems that she always had a positive outlook.
You know, I'm so glad you said that because I think it's one of the most remarkable things about her and one of the reasons she matters so very much right now. I think many people right now are feeling an incredible sense of despair. Many people are unhappy with the way things are and they don't feel they can make a difference. Or many people are unhappy with the way things are and they're trying to fight for change, but they feel despair. Jessica Mitford, who lost two children and her first husband was estranged from her family, was a lifelong anti-fascist and anti-authoritarian who never lost her spirits. She was always able to keep her spirits up, and that's how she kept the fight up. And she was always able to use humor against her adversaries. And I think she offers a wonderful model today for those of us who may be feeling exhausted or despair of how to keep up the fight by keeping up our own spirits.
When did she die? And also, what would she think of the current political situation, not just in the United States, but in the world?
Well, she'd have an enormous amount to say about the current political situation. No question about that. As I say, she was a lifelong anti-authoritarian, and the global turn towards authoritarian rule would alarm her enormously, and she would be one of the people who would put it in the context of a global history of fascism and of periods around the world where different countries, for different reasons at different times, have turned to fascist leaders, have turned to authoritarian or tyrannical rulers. She would be appalled at what's happening in the United States. She would also be one of the people, along with Gavin Newsom, who would find a way to make jokes that would raise people's spirits and draw people together. She died in 1996, and she lived long enough to witness the turn from fascism through the Berkeley free speech movement and the civil rights movement, which she was a very active member of. She became, at the very end of her life, much more allied with American feminism. She, I think, on the one hand, had hope that things were changing for the better, but she had a long view. She had the long historical view, and she never forgot that the reason fascist leaders succeed is that people go along with their rule. She had witnessed it firsthand, and she was always watching out for it. She lived through the 1950s. She was brought before HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. Friends of hers were jailed. Friends of hers killed themselves. Families were ruined. People left the United States. And she knew that something like HUAC could happen, that kind of repression, that kind of attack on free speech was always a danger. So she never took freedom for granted. She never took free speech for granted. She fought for it all her life, and she would say today that we are all responsible for stemming the tide of authoritarianism. She would put it back on us.
It sounds like even early in life, she always played the long game.
That's an interesting way to put it, and I think it's actually true. She played a long game even as a child. So alone among her family, she was very, very concerned about fairness, social fairness. She was very concerned about social inequality. And she said it was a really lonely opposition. That was her phrase. She said she lived a lonely opposition amongst the Mitford clan. And it wasn't until she was 19 that she found somebody with whom she could leave, with whom she could escape, and with whom she could start a new life. After he died, she had to play a long game again because Jessica Mitford was constitutionally absolutely incapable of being alone. This is someone for whom being alone was the worst thing that could happen. So what she needed was a community of activists. And it took her years to find that. She found it in the Communist Party. And then along comes Khrushchev and the revelations about Stalin, right? And so, like other communists, she ended up leaving the party. And then she had to find another community. And she found that as a writer, which we think of as a lonely profession. She turned it into a collaborative one. She made a community out of writing. But one of the ways I think you're exactly right that she played a long game is she was always building communities with which she could work and with which she could rely for a sustained period of time. And in that way, she might be a model for today as well.
The book is called Troublemaker, The Fierce, Unruly Life of Jessica Mitford. Carla, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a great pleasure to talk to you.
Carla Kaplan, author of Troublemaker, The Fierce, Unruly Life of Jessica Mitford. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0849, and you'll find the link to Carla's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
Why do chicken coops only have 2 doors? Because if they had 4, they would be chicken sedans.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/thestufffile program.
I'm standing and speaking out for Canada. Hi, this is Lisa Laflamme. As a reporter, I've seen the world, and it's always made me realize how lucky I am to be a Canadian. That's why whenever possible, my shopping list is a Canadian shopping list to protect Canadian jobs and support Canadian businesses. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
Here's a penny for your thoughts from the Stuff File program, coming to you from Montreal, Canada, a country that doesn't have pennies.
And still to come on the program, we'll meet the author of the short story collection Elephants in the Room. Plus, Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is back for his monthly visit. We also have a morning shower thought and, of course, an idiot of the day. But we've got much more in Stuff File News right here, right now. Yasmin Victoria Erazo was arrested after Florida deputies clocked her driving 107 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone on US 19 in Palm Harbor. According to Pinellas County Sheriff's Office records, Erazo was charged with dangerous excessive speeding, a misdemeanor. Deputies stopped her blue 2020 Kia Forte at around 11:54 p.m. on November the 6th, when she reportedly explained she was speeding to reach a Little Caesars pizza store before it closed.
Pizza.
She was processed at 12:52 a.m. and released at 6:52 a.m. after posting $150 bail. Gee. Overnight in jail, and she never got her Little Caesars pizza. She must be hungry. I wonder where she'll have breakfast.
It's how Little Caesars does breakfast. Check out the pizzini.
Only in limited locations.
Pizza.
Speaking of going to the nth degree for your taste buds, 54-year-old Andre McKechnie, a convicted murderer serving life in prison in Australia, is suing Victoria's Department of Justice and Corrections over a ban on Vegemite behind bars.
We're happy little Vegemites, as bright can be. We all enjoy our Vegemite for breakfast, lunch and tea.
McKechnie argues the prohibition, in effect since 2006, violates his right to enjoy his culture as an Australian. Prison officials banned the popular breakfast spread, claiming inmates could use it to hide contraband or make alcohol.
But there's one thing we all agree on. We love our Vegemite.
McKechnie received a life sentence for fatally stabbing a property developer in Queensland during the 1990s before his transfer to Victoria. His lawsuit also alleges authorities failed to provide food adequate to maintain his well-being. The case is scheduled for trial next year. By the way, the thick brown condiment made from yeast extract was created in Melbourne in 1923 as an alternative to British Marmite. Here's a rule of thumb. Before you commit murder, think of all the things you'll miss if you're caught.
Be sure you put Vegemite next to the pepper and salt whenever you set the table.
In some prisons in the world, you don't even get pepper and salt. 53-year-old James Howard rear-ended a Volkswagen on a Missoula, Montana roadway on the evening of November 13th while attempting to urinate into a Budweiser can while driving his Chevy Suburban. A highway patrol officer found Howard holding the beer can, which he said, when questioned, contained urine and not beer. Howard explained he rear-ended the vehicle because he was attempting to urinate into the beer can while driving. The Volkswagen driver said he saw approaching lights and told his girlfriend to brace for impact while stopped at a traffic light. Howard showed signs of intoxication with slurred speech and wet pants. According to court records, Howard stated that he had more than a couple of DUIs and was not supposed to be driving. His blood alcohol measured over 3 times the legal limit. Howard faces felony aggravated DUI charges and is held on $10,000 bond. Yeah, this story proves that you don't necessarily buy beer, you merely rent it. Have I said everything about this story, or have I forgotten something?
When you say Budweiser, you've said it all.
Glad I have my bases covered. Anyway, let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program, shall we? Betty Jane Hegerat is an award-winning author. Her latest book is a collection of short stories under the title of Elephants in the Room. She joins us from Calgary via Riverside.com. Hi, Betty.
Hi, Peter.
Thanks for being on the program with us. First of all, as I mentioned, you're an award-winning author. You've had novels, you've had short stories. When you sit down to write, do you know beforehand whether it's going to be a short story, novella, or novel, or do you just write until it ends?
I do free-fall writing, so if something clicks, I sit down and write, hoping that it's not wanting to be a novel. I love short stories. Short stories are my favorite because I like writing nice, clean, concise prose that comes to a conclusion, ties up nicely. I've done novels, and novels are like wrestling with a big woolly bear. Not that I don't love them, but the short story is my favorite genre. I once started a book because I had sitting at a service station and looking across the street, saw a garage with grease on the floor, and it immediately evoked a memory of when I was 10 years old and there was a mass murder in the town very close to us, and the bodies had been buried in a grease pit. And you can imagine how that gruesomeness stayed in my mind. And that ended up as a book called The Boy, which is a hybrid of investigative journalism, fiction, memoir, and metafiction. It was a bit of a mess of a thing, but it has done well. So sometimes something like that. I'm also an eavesdropper, and my children have been really quite embarrassed because if we're in a restaurant or somewhere, I'm kind of leaning toward the back, the booth behind us, but no, I don't know, and I don't write every day. I know many people who do, and they call it journaling. But if something just clicks, that's usually when I just start jotting things down.
So you're an eavesdropper. Does that mean you enjoy like train rides and planes and sitting in airports and terminals?
I like being in a setting where there are a lot of people around, but I'm not particularly engaged with anyone. I was sitting at a meeting one day, and people behind me were talking about someone who had died, and they said, and you know, she cooked a meal for every single day of the year after she died. Can you imagine anyone eating those meals? And that turned into a story with really great legs too. It was about this poor man opening his freezer, finding a meal for every day of the year with a note from his wife from the beyond. So yeah, just things like that. I love it.
The book is called Elephants in the Room, a collection of short stories. First of all, why the title?
The title actually came out of personal experience. My husband and I ended up cleaning out the house of someone in the family whom we'd barely known. We didn't know this person had traveled in Africa, and the house was absolutely packed with memorabilia. There were big statues, little statues. There was a wooden family of elephants. There were pictures and plaques, elephants everywhere. And in order to kind of resolve that situation for myself, I wrote the story about that, and I wrote it as therapy. And then when I was putting the collection together, looking for a title for it, someone who was helping me with the editing suggested that there really was an elephant in the room, that someone or something that's not there and yet totally present in every single story. And when I went back and looked, I could find these elephants. I could find them in every corner. So hence the title, Elephants in the Room. It worked. It actually worked well because that story, Elephants, the last story in the book, is the one I wanted to go from. So.
And the collection of short stories within the book, are they connected in any way, or are they different genres? And how do you go about putting together a short story collection?
You know, that's a really good question because I hadn't had a book published in 10 years. And I was I kind of got caught up on that last gruesome book I'd published, and it took me a while to work my way out of there. But I started looking at the files, the stories I had on file, and I found some that I had started writing, never finished. I tried to finish some of them were real duds and never got finished. A few of them did. And then I started looking back at stories that had been published in literary magazines, but never in a book. And I just gathered them all together, and no, there is no connecting theme. This is a collection of individual stories, but as I said, with that elephant in the room. And they're told from the perspective of an 80-year-old man, a young gay guy who's meeting his biological daughter, who he didn't know for the first time. He's 35 years old. An old lady, a kid who's about 10 years old. So I've written from the male perspective, I've written from the female, I've written ages, all kinds of ages. And when you start to submit a collection like that, people have trouble with it because they think, well, what can we call this? And my fiction is often called domestic fiction, which I dislike because it always suggests that I'm in the kitchen wearing an apron and working on the computer while I'm waiting for the cookies to come out of the oven. It makes it far too homey and homely as far as I'm concerned, because I think all of the stories in the collection, and I strive to do this, have a universal theme. I've read a lot of other stories written by authors where the stories are cross-culture, and the ones I like best are the ones when I can read and think, yeah, I know that sort of situation in my own life. I don't, I think I don't want to have any story or any collection that suggests that it was written by an old white woman. And so I hope that these stories have a universality to them.
Well, you mentioned that you don't journal, and also the fact that you hadn't had a book in a while. So
10 years,
yeah,
yeah.
so I'm just wondering, have you gone back and looked at some of your previous writing, and now that you are 10 years older, do you reflect on that and see a difference in who you were then and who you are now?
Oh God, yes. I've reread some of my old books. Actually, I've been rereading all of them, and I really would like to edit. I would like to change things in them, but I think, no, that was a different time, and I was writing from a different time and age and a place. But yes, for sure. And I think every writer goes back to early work and reads it, and it may be a little bit cringeworthy, but only to the author, not to the reader, because it's new to the reader. But I look at it and I think, ay, what happened?
Well, when you go back to that period of time, does it in any way, shape, or form affect your current writing because you've looked back at that?
Yeah, it actually does, because there are stories that I've looked back at and I think, this story wasn't complete. I would like to write a story that somehow completes it, not a sequel, but something that takes the same theme, similar characters, possibly even the same characters, and write it from the point at which it ended. What happens next? People tell me that my stories are open-ended, and I have been criticized. Someone got very upset with me at a book club because she said there wasn't a single story to which she knew the ending. She said, you have to end them somehow. Well, no, I think it's up to the reader to decide which way this actually went. So I do like leaving some room. I don't like tying things up in nice, neat knots.
I'm going back to you being what I like to term an audio voyeur, right?
Oh, yeah.
And be
I like
yeah,
that.
and being in a crowd. Well, I am the same way. So, do you actually sit down and take notes, or do you remember everything you heard in a conversation?
No, I never take notes. I don't know why that seems like an intrusion to me to take notes when I've been sitting there listening. But I once heard an author talking about the death of her father, and she said while the family was all in the room, she kept running out and taking notes. And that just really distressed me, because I thought, no, I can't in the middle of an experience stop and pause and think this would be a great story. I'm going to take notes. No, I just take the little bit of conversation home with me and let it perk in there for a while, and things happen. I have experiences in my own life, and a lot of the stories in this collection are based on my own life, and I'm trying to resolve those things, and I look back and I think, yeah, maybe not. Maybe it shouldn't have gone that way, or maybe I shouldn't be the main character in this book. Maybe I should put the person I'm having the conflict with in that position. So no, I don't take notes. I always leave room for the story to grow and change. So many of my stories started out as something going somewhere and turned around in the middle to turning the obnoxious character into the main character, writing from her point of view. So no notes.
When your friends and family read your works, do they see you in them?
They see themselves sometimes, Peter, which is interesting. When my 3 children heard that this new book was coming out, 2 of them immediately said, "Are we in it?" And my answer to that usually is, there's a story in here about a mother, and the 3 of you taught me everything I know about mothering. So yeah, I think we can say you're in it. I had a story in my first collection that really was triggered by an incident with a next-door neighbor. I wrote a story about a crotchety, miserable old man next door, and the woman on the other side who is sick and tired of him. And there are some things she does that truly get to him. And my next door neighbor read this, and she said, I kind of thought this might be us in the story. But then I got to the ending, I thought, no. This story ends with this neighbor that I'm writing from the perspective of, who is newly widowed, to looking out, standing outside, looking up at the stars, and then glancing at her neighbor's window, and seeing the 2 of them in front of the fridge, both of them naked, arms around each other, sharing a drink. And my neighbor said, "That wasn't us. I knew that wasn't us." So, you put a spin on it at the end. Yeah.
Well, the current book is called Elephants in the Room. It's a collection of short stories. Betty, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Oh, thanks so much, Peter. I love it.
Betty Jane Hegerat, author of the short story compilation Elephants in the Room. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0849, and you'll find links to Betty's website, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
Evolution makes me wonder. Maybe people like to pet animals because they miss having fur.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com.
Hey, how would you like to become a patron of the Stuff File program? It's easy to do. By going to patreon.com and becoming a patron, you help to make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. And if you become a regular patron, as a Patreon reward, I'll share with you an electronic version of my book, Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. You've heard me say on many occasions about the myriad of celebrities I've had the chance to talk to that are contained in my book, which is published by Bear Manor Media. You've also heard me mention that some of the celebrities in my book, and many others, can be heard on our page at patreon.com. If you've been on the fence about joining Patreon, let me try to pull you over to our side. Join Patreon and claim your copy of Great Conversations, my interviews with 2 men on the moon and a galaxy of stars. Sign up at patreon.com/The Stuff File program.
Latitude 47 degrees 14 minutes north. Longitude 84 degrees 39 minutes west. Location Montreal, Canada. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. Now, the Stuff File presents Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. It's radio that's out of this world.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy, is a member of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and the author of National Geographic's Backyard Guide to the Night Sky, and also National Geographic's Stargazer's Atlas, the Ultimate Guide to the Night Sky. And Andrew, the boringly named Comet 31 Atlas, is back in the news again for a couple of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot going on with this comet on social media. We've heard so much, real crazy stuff, aliens and all of that stuff. But really, the science itself is just so impressive. It is a comet. It is an exotic comet because it is from another planetary system. It's called an interstellar object. It's the third known object that originates outside of our solar system. And what's exciting is it's passing through our solar system over the next few months. And this is allowing astronomers to train their telescopes to look at them. Now, while the comet is quite far away from Earth, it is getting a close-up view thanks to orbiters that we have around the planet Mars. So there is a spacecraft particularly that is being trained to take images of this interstellar comet of 3I Atlas. It's called the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter. It was put around Mars to look at the atmosphere of the red planet by the European Space Agency a few years back. And so they actually turned the spacecraft around to, instead of looking down on Mars, to look out into space and check out this interstellar comet flying close to Mars, relatively close. We're talking about 30 million kilometers away. This happened back in October, and the images are being released, and also the scientific data around it, what they're learning about it. And thanks to that data, basically scientists are able to improve the predicted trajectory accuracy of the path that this comet is following in the solar system tenfold. This compared to the observations that we get here on our own planet. So thanks to this spacecraft that's zooming around Mars, using the cameras on board, we were able to increase the accuracy of our understanding of where this comet is heading in space tenfold. And this is really exciting because it helps us improved trajectory really means that future observations can be much more precise. And this, while 3I Atlas doesn't pose any threat to Earth, the techniques that we're honing here using these cameras on board a distant spacecraft around another planet is, it allows us to have precise tracking of a fast, distant object. And this could have potential benefits of planetary defense efforts here with our own world. So if there happens to be an object that's, that might be on collision course with Earth, a large asteroid or meteor in the future, we could utilize our flotilla of spacecrafts around the solar system that may be closer to an object like this and get a much better view.
And speaking of that star trekking comet, there is also the possibility of watching it from telescopes as it shoots past the sun?
Yeah, so there are telescopes that are being trained on 3I Atlas, and it's been happening over the last many weeks, and will be continuing to happen in the weeks and months to come, where we get various observatories being able to provide live views of the comet. One of these places that I encourage people to check out their live streams is the Virtual Telescope Project. That's based out of Rome, Italy, and it provides regular updates on the comet. You can actually see it flying in space amongst the stars, the background of stars, and they provide live imagery as well on the internet. So that's the Virtual Telescope Project. It's a really great outfit. I know the astrophysicist who runs it out of Rome, Italy, and he's got this amazing robotic telescope that he uses to train it on this comet.
And finally, we have two stories about two competing companies. Of course, we're talking SpaceX and Blue Origin. They both had, shall we say, milestones in the last little while. SpaceX launched for the 500th time, a used rocket. And meanwhile, Blue Origin's New Glenn, their rocket landed on a platform at sea. So which one do you want to tackle first?
Well, let's look at SpaceX. They have a much more storied background. I mean, this is the 500th time they have an orbital mission using their famous reusable rockets. It marks a milestone in reusability of booster rockets, of launching assets into space. In this one that happened on November 17th, a Sentinel-6B ocean monitoring satellite was launched into space. And the idea here, what's really, I think, noteworthy is that how regular these reusable rockets have become. SpaceX has brought that into the market, and they're really central, these reusable rockets are, to lowering the costs of space access. And this underscores how routine reuse is becoming. It also demonstrates, I think, how mature the commercial launch capabilities are of SpaceX now. The routine use enables more frequent and cheaper launches, generally speaking. And if we look at Blue Origin, they're already kind of really gaining on SpaceX's rule on reusability with their New Glenn rocket that landed now on a platform at sea. They achieved the landmark of a reusable booster landing on a barge at sea on November 13th. They managed to also launch 2 NASA probes called Escapade, that's the name of this mission. Simultaneously, they launched both of these probes using this New Glenn rocket. And they managed to land the booster back on the barge. It's really impressive because until now, reusable first stage landings were completely dominated by SpaceX. Now we've got this New Glenn named booster by Blue Origin, which of course is run by Jeff Bezos. And this success was actually, a lot of people didn't expect it to happen from Blue Origin, and it really caught people off guard at how mature their technology has become, and they're going to give a run for the money for it with SpaceX. So I think why this matters, I think, if we look at it globally, Peter, it's every time another company successfully reuses a large booster, I think basically the competition basically accelerates, right? And the costs for consumers may go down. In saying if I'm a company and I'm building a satellite, I can get it into space cheaper if there's a competition, and that's what looks like we're attaining. So we got a new heavy lift reusable rocket. It's called New Glenn, and it's going to open up a new frontier with larger payloads, and maybe even possibly helping to bring humans to the moon as well, being a competition in all those contracts that NASA's giving out to SpaceX. Blue Origin may be getting a larger piece of the pie now.
It's amazing the amount of flights that SpaceX has done, because never mind the fact that they've reused a rocket 500 times, just the fact that they had gone 500 times into space kind of caught me off guard.
I know that milestone really, where did that cut? It's been 500 already? It still seems new. And I think also noteworthy here, we're talking also about Blue Origin's New Glenn. Just remember, this is only the second time that they've used this rocket. And they managed to do something like landing the booster. They did this on their second attempt. It took SpaceX, a lot of people may have forgotten, over 10 times to do. It took them 10 missions before they nailed that landing of a reusable booster. Blue Origins did it on their second effort. So that's something. That's quite something.
Is this something that other countries will be doing, or even NASA itself will be doing?
Look, I mean, the way it looks with NASA right now to me is that they really want to farm this out. The booster rocket business, lifting payloads and assets into space to private companies. They're kind of getting out of that business. So I don't think they'll be investing in that. And you can see that with their space launch system, the large rocket, that booster rocket that they've built in-house. It's not reusable. In fact, they're using old off-the-shelf space shuttle technology on that launch system that NASA's built. So they're farming things out. And I think in terms of other nations, they're still far behind in this time. We haven't seen anyone else step up yet. American companies are dominating the reusability arena, and so it'll be interesting to see if China can step up to it, because they're lowering costs. This is a burgeoning business, a space economy is, and these reusable boosters are going to be key in making that a viable economy.
And how can one find you in space?
Well, that's easy. You can go onto Facebook or YouTube or Instagram, and you'll find me under the moniker The Night Sky Guy. And I'm there to help guide you to all things of interest in the night sky. And wherever you are around the world and you're looking up, I'll be there to guide you and understanding and navigating the night sky.
This is the first time, or actually the last time, that we're going to be on together on the air this year. So I want to be the first one to mention happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you and all your listeners. And next year's shaping up to be a banner year for space. So I'm looking forward to talking more next year.
And what also you're looking forward to?
Clear skies.
Andrew Fazekas, the Night Sky Guy. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0849, and you'll find links to Andrew's site to get your own personal autographed copy of his books. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. This Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
Timothy Myers Poole of Tyler, Texas, is facing criminal mischief charges after allegedly vandalizing a Veterans Day flag display and leaving his driver's license behind. According to the Smith County Sheriff's Office, Poole tore down American flags and bent poles at the Rotary Club of Tyler's Field of Valor display at the Rose Garden complex on the night of November 13th. Police confirm Poole left his driver's license at the scene. Poole also allegedly damaged Lakewood Church in Flint by throwing a concrete piece through the front door glass. A deputy later arrested Poole during an unrelated traffic stop after he acted aggressively and refused orders to leave. The Rotary Club estimates over $2,000 in damage to replace broken flagpoles. Now, why? Oh, why? If you're planning to vandalize a Veterans Day display, would you leave your driver's license behind? And while we're at it, why would you even think of desecrating a display to fallen war heroes? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0849. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, Stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0849. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as PA Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WNRHLP-FM in Newport Richey, Florida, KZZHLP-FM in Eureka, California, CKUW-FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
Sir Dudley here. You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. Though Peter has had an extensive career in television, he is most suited for radio. To quote William Shakespeare, "The tartness of his face sours ripe grapes."